And it got to a stage where house prices sort of left me. And I'm like, shit, what do I do now? Like, they're not 200, they're 250, 300.
Yeah.
I need a bigger deposit. So what do I do? And that's when I looked at my existing portfolio of 3-4 houses and I'm going, right, I'm going to leave the bank now anyway. My granddad's not around. My dad needs a hand. I'm more flexible. I've got freedom of my time right now. What do I do? And there was a builder actually doing a build for me and he just started messing me about. So I had to kick him off the job. And and that was after, like, I was very patient, and $4,000 in extra and another $4,000. And I'm like, I'm coming for my run every night round here. I'm opening the door and there's still not a bloody roof on. Like, what are you?
Where's the money?
Exactly. What are you doing? So once I kicked him out, he didn't need much help getting kicked out. He was like, yeah, I'm just trying to milk you right now. One of the head builders said, hey, Sean, I haven't been paid. And I went, my contract's not with you. I'm pissed off myself. So he goes, do you have any work? And I went, yeah, I've got this job. And that's it. He goes, I want £100 a day. That's all I want. And I'll get your job done. And he goes, I just need a labourer and materials. I nicked my dad's van from his shop to put like 2x4 timbers in. And I started labouring. And that's what I started doing. So once I realised that a laminating floor just needs a chop saw and how to measure it, and it was just a little bit of mathematics, and how to mix plaster. It's just half a bag of this, X amount of water, mix it, learn the consistency. I was like, the harder I work and the more stuff I get prepared for the builder, the more he just, I'll put that on. Like, he knows how to level it. He knows how to click things in. So I was just like, hey, like, just start helping him. So once I'd done my one, he was like, where's the next job? And I was like, yeah, where is the next job? The next door neighbor called and said, could you render our wall? And he gave a massive quotation of like £3,000 for like a 3-day job. She was like, yeah, that's my cheapest quote. Yeah, when can you guys start? I've seen you working really professionally here. And that's how it happened. So I went and done that job. I got another planning permission agreed in one of my other properties for a loft, rear and first floor. So once we it started being my business where people go, where did you get this money from buying all these houses? Well, while I was doing my houses, I started doing jobs for other people. And these 3, 4, 5 grands that kept coming in, I couldn't believe it. It was unbelievable how much you get paid for doing a good job and helping people do extensions. And I still worked in McDonald's at this time at 26 on a weekend because I just liked the thought of, what if my houses don't give me rent? I need that buffer. And this lady came in and she goes, Sean, you do a bit of building work. My boss, she does all these big jobs in central London. She's working on a project where she needs cash flow because with these commercial projects she does, she gets paid after. So when you do the residential ones, you get paid up front. And she goes, can you do a build with us, for this rare extension? It's from this lady from the BBC, I can't really say her name. And I was like, yeah. And in my head, I was like, shit, are we really doing this? Like, I've never properly done a big extension like this before. And bloody, it was the hardest extension you'll ever imagine. The whole bloody thing was made with waterproof plywood. Yeah. Wow. It was a 6 meter by 6 meter. And we had to bolt plates down. And my builder just went, I know exactly what to do. And we actually built the whole extension on the floor and we had to erect it up. And these beams had to sit on top of it. And then we had to put birch plywood. So it was like an exposed beams. Oh, wow. And it was 4 or 5 builders said no to it. And I just said, yeah, let me do it. And yeah, that was quite a big job for us, 80, 90 grand. And, I was just on it.
So you was a part-time builder while being a landlord, while being at McDonald's, while helping at your dad's business. You were wearing a load of hats.
Yeah, so it's all about time management. I had my structure. Where did I need to be at what time? I said to my dad, look, my building work don't happen in the evening, so I'll do your evening shifts in the shop. Yeah. So you go home at 6 o'clock, I'll handle it 6 to 10. My mum would help in the morning so he could have a little bit of a break, go to his gym, and then he'll do a few hours in the evening, and I'll just close his shop up. Wow. And during the days, I was on the building site, and Saturday, Sunday, I'd just do a shift. So, on Saturday, Sunday, I'd do a shift in McDonald's. It's just about saying to yourself, I'm nothing. I'm not bigger than money, because I don't follow money. I just follow success. I follow freedom. I want freedom of my time. And that's a bypass of this instrument called money, fiat currency. I need to go and earn that. I need to make more of that. And how do I get that? I mean, look, I was a business owner from the age of 16. Why? Because 16, my first 8 years before that was learning about entrepreneurship, business, being next to the man like my father, you know, and I absorbed it. I wasn't like the other kids who were like, no, I'm busy with computer games or I'm going with my friends. I did do some of that on certain days, but I chose to listen to my dad. After that, I did accounting and finance. So I'm a master of numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been to the uni, haven't you?
Yeah.
Your degree.
Yeah. So I was just in that circle of no one in the family's gone to do a degree. I want to make my family proud. So I used to do Monday, Wednesday, Friday in Greenwich Uni, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday is to do McDonald's. So I used to make enough to make sure I paid for my uni fee so I wasn't in debt, and kept myself busy all the time. Did uni teach me everything? Maybe not. You know, was it a good experience meeting new people, friends that I've still got today? Yes. Did it teach me about time management, skills of leading a team when you had to do projects together? Yes. Things like that. So everything's an experience in life, and I just wanted to experience everything. At 21, I started in the bank. So I learned how to cash money, count money really fast. But at the same time as counting money, having conversations with people, building something called rapport, that sort of connection. Because when I'm about to check your account, I'm also looking on a gateway system of your direct debits. And what's your largest direct debit? It's your mortgage. So I'm like, hey, when's the last time? Hey, I've just banked your £200. Here's your receipt. Oh, can I ask you a quick question, Joanne? I already know your name and we've already built that. When's the last time we reviewed your mortgage? Oh, I haven't really. Yeah, I've seen it's changed. Should we get that looked at for you? All of a sudden, I became this guy who knew how to get all of these leads, savings, lending, insurances, all of these things. And I became just like a superstar in there, you know. All of a sudden, they go, how's this guy in 18 months? Like, we have this rule, 18 months, that he can't move anywhere. How's he doing this in 8 months? He's just shifting to a different role. Because the hires above are going, that's a star kid. Get him into the next role. He'll sell more. You know, just especially after a recession, I was number one in West End, you know? So that's a bit of the things that I don't really talk about in a podcast. My journey through Barclays, I was a cashier, coordinator, personal banker, number one in the area, premier relationship manager at 23 years old. I was one of the youngest in that boardroom. There's nothing but 40-year-olds. You know, when you see these old bankers who've been smoking at their desks, you know, and they're going, yeah, this is my client for 20 years. I was the new fresh kid going, they're thinking, this little young clean shaven kid, what's he gonna do? Because I knew all of the little servicing and provided all of that service for these people, all of a sudden they felt they owed me something. So when their mortgage came up or they had a lump sum of money coming from their oil trading and they got 300-400 grand, they're going, Sean, what shall I do with this? What account shall I put it in? Or what investments do you have? So it's all about how do you relate to people, how, like, whether you're in McDonald's serving someone a burger or whether you're with, you know, Mr. Cornwall in the IOD club, Institution of Directors Club, playing squash with him and find out to do that deal, is people just buy from people.
Of course, it's all sales, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's all of these things, you've got to absorb it, and it's like this sort of magic pill. I don't know if it's like the Matrix or something, which pill
or
do you
limitless.
Want, you know, or something, but it's just like this intuition carries inside you. So when I'm looking at buy-to-lets, I'm like, this is great. We're providing housing for families. And then you just reach a ceiling where it's like, hey, hang on, this ain't sort of profitable for me doing this in this space anymore. And I'm outgrowing this. Then you go into HMOs, as we said, and then you face certain challenges again. And these Article 4s, etc. Then you go into, you know, multi-let unit blocks, and then you go into semi-commercials where there ain't that extra, you know, bit of stamp duty that you have to pay on a normal residential. So you avoid certain costs, and then you go more into sort of care home partner, and then you just think, hey, hang on, I've just done something called diversification. All my eggs are not in one basket. I've got a better that. Guess what? If one of these industries or sectors go down, my whole portfolio don't go down. You know, you got to realize that as you grow, your element of sort of risk to the market is different. You can't just go, yeah, I'll have a simple buy to let this, and then one rule crushes you. You got to say, all right, it's affected this part of my business. Am I going to now sell this off, or can I look at this differently? Can I give it to the council back, like where I get guaranteed rent for it? They appreciate this more. Will they give me a premium? Is there longevity here? Or what's the benefit in selling this asset? Will I have to pay a huge amount of capital gains tax? Will I be hit by, you know, more stamp duty? Like you just got to look at it holistically. And this is why education is so important when you come into this sector, because it's not just like, yeah, I've just got the keys to a house and that's it. This is when your problem starts. When I see that.
Literally. So with that, What's your opinions about Section 21?
Yeah, so rules and regulations in the property sector is nothing new.